Hi, you don't know me. My name's Adam Lipsius. I'm a film writer, producer, director, and I'm here to persuade you to help pass the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. All right, we all know it's not the first anymore. Obviously, we already have 27 amendments, but the first, as in the very first one our founding fathers proposed back in 1789. Let's call it the First Amendment. It was the one that I think they thought was the most important, which is why they made it first. What the hell am I talking about, you say? Another First Amendment, you say. Maybe the most important? It gets weirder. You see, over 231 years ago, the House and Senate passed 12 amendments in the original Bill of Rights, not just the 10 we think of today, all passed by the required 2/3 majorities to amend our charter. And the first of these, and again, I think the most important, is still waiting for enough states to ratify it. Really. It's a crazy story. I'll explore it more in future videos, rest assured, because you're undoubtedly sitting on the edge of your seat waiting for me to do so. You just want more because this one's so good. P.S. As added inducement, I'm also going to try and lose a lot of weight between now and those videos getting shot, so you'll be even more enthusiastic about this idea, since skinny people are way more persuasive, right? Let's not argue that point. Let's get back to the point, which is the First Amendment in our Bill of Rights. It was supposed to make sure that Congress was super representative of the people. It wanted to make sure your congressman had no more than 50,000 constituents. That would mean way more Congress people, and they'd all actually know most of the folks they represented in Congress. That's how the framers of the Constitution wanted it to be. Pop quiz. How many people does your congressperson represent right now? The answer is, it depends on where you live. If you're from Rhode Island, it's about 530,000 people. Colorado, you're close to 800,000. And if you live in Montana, it's over 1 million. The average is about 750,000 people, and that, for the record, is way too many folks to get to know in one career from Washington. And the fact that the numbers are wildly unequal, that's completely unfair. James Madison didn't want this to happen. P.S. He wrote the Bill of Rights. You know who else thought big congressional districts sucked? George Washington. Yes, that George Washington. He presided over the Constitutional Convention for 100 days in sweltering hot Philadelphia, summer of 1787. And the only time he says anything on the record in any session is when he stands up to argue for smaller congressional districts. The founders of our government believed Congress had to keep growing as the country grew. So what happened? Only 9 of the original 13 states passed this First Amendment. But for the record, only 10 passed what we now think of as the Bill of Rights. So that was actually pretty good. Don't get me started on what the other 3 were doing. The First Amendment eventually gets 11 states to pass it. But it's always one vote away from ratification for the first decade of our country. But the Founding Fathers soon kind of forgot about it because they were busy actually running the country. And they kind of started dying. And because the U.S. informally abided by the First Amendment's governing principle for the first 60 years until 1853. Just for reference sake, our first Congress had 65 representatives. That was roughly 1 for every 33,000 citizens. And the institution kept growing for the next 120 years until in 1913 when it had 435 members, its current size. Each congressman then represented about 200,000 people, blowing past the amendment's maximum, but at least still growing. Let's just note here as a reality check that 435 congressmen is not a special number. No magic, it isn't written in the Constitution, not anywhere. In fact, the only reason Congress stopped at 435 was because in the 19-teens and 20s, tons of immigrants come to America. They overwhelmingly settled in cities, and for the first time in U.S. history, urban population equaled rural population. Places like New York City, Philadelphia, Chicago, they're set to get more powerful, and that freaks out a lot of small town and small state representatives who didn't want things to change. So they opposed any future increases in the size of Congress, freezing the House of Representatives at its 1913 size. And this is the creepiest, they eliminated the requirement that congressional districts be compact and contiguous. So state authorities could suddenly futz with the numbers to deprive these new Americans of equal representation just because they live in big cities. According to former Congressman Thomas Downey, it was mostly racism and fear motivating those congressmen over 100 years ago, not any love of the Founding Fathers or their vision for our government. This is why I want us to finally ratify the First Amendment. It would protect our democracy from becoming too insulated from the people it was built to serve and too reliant on big donations to win massive elections. This original First Amendment would even out the size of congressional districts and even out voting in presidential elections, making them more democratic because the size of Congress affects how the Electoral College works. It would make each of us that much more involved in deciding who our leaders are and make them much more responsive to what we need. Most importantly, it would fulfill the framers of the Constitution's original intent. All right, how could I know this? Because they wrote it and then passed it in both houses of Congress and in 11 states. All we have to do is get it through another 27 states, and this will become much more than just the law of the land. It will be in the Constitution. We just need 27 more state legislatures to agree. All right, I undoubtedly sound like a lunatic at this point. This must seem insane, but hang on, because some dude already did it with the original Second Amendment. Seriously, he was a sophomore at the University of Texas at Austin back in 1982. He wrote a paper about the original Second Amendment, and his professor thought it was stupid. She gave him a C on it, but that crappy grade only makes him fight harder for the idea. He started writing congressmen and state legislators, and just 10 years later, after persuading 29 more states to sign on, that first Second Amendment became the 27th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. It passed in 1992 and regulated congressional salaries. Seriously, don't believe me? Just look it up. His name is Gregory Watson, and they even interviewed him on The Daily Show. It's pretty funny. Since his amazing accomplishment, the only part of the original Bill of Rights that still hasn't passed is the one that would make the U.S. government more democratic. Really. Now, I believe in this stuff. I think it's important that we do something about it. Change history today. Learn more, at least. Watch our monthly-ish videos. Get the score on how our legislature is actually doing legislating. I mean, they've got a lot to do, so let's keep track of how they're doing while we help them make America work even better. Do it for James Madison, do it for George Washington, do it for yourself. Hell, do it for me so I can start losing the weight. Because 231 years later, the wait will finally be over when you help change this country for the better. Do it for the people you love, really, right now. And thank you. P.S. I really believe in this stuff. Like, this is how America gets better. Thank you.